Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for braving the continuing drizzle and showing up for us today. We're in the Craig H. Nielsen Auditorium for History is Lunch. I'm Chris Goodwin with the Mississippi Department of Archives and History. And if you have not already, please silence your cell phones. Remember, tomorrow at 6 p.m., we'll have our first Under the Light program of the year. Daphne Chamberlain will moderate a panel discussion with Dennis Damer, Hollis Watkins, Flonzie Brown Wright, and Roosevelt Hawkins Sr. on the importance of black landowners during the Civil Rights Movement. Normally we have those programs in the Central Gallery of the Civil Rights Museum. This time, because there are some video pieces that we want to show, we'll have it in the auditorium. So tomorrow night at 6. Then on Saturday, February the 8th, in this space again, from 9:30 a.m. to noon, we'll offer another beginning genealogy workshop with Joyce Dixon Lawson, who is our curator of research and genealogy. Guest speaker Kendra Wright will talk about the 2020 U.S. Census. You can register on the MDH website for $10 and plan to join us at the Old Capitol Museum on the evening of February 11th when Eric Foner will be the keynote speaker in the department's commemoration of the 150th anniversary of the election of Hiram Revels as the first African-American to serve in the United States Senate. That program is co-sponsored by the Mississippi Humanities Council and Alcorn State University. Finally, I hope that you'll join us here next week for History's Lunch when our friend Jerry Mitchell will discuss his new book, Race Against Time, A Reporter Reopens the Unsolved Murder Cases of the Civil Rights Era. Today, we are delighted to welcome Stephen Cunetto to tell us about the Templeton Music Museum and Ragtime Festival at Mississippi State University. Stephen Cunetto is Associate Dean of the University Libraries and manager of the Charles Templeton Music Museum. He earned his B.S. in Communication at Mississippi State University and his M.I.L.S. at the University of Southern Mississippi. Cunetto has served as president of the Mississippi Library Association, Mississippi Theater Association, Starkville Area Arts Council, and Starkville Community Theater, and as executive director of the Mississippi Theater Association from 2003 to 2016. And in 2016, that organization named its highest award in his honor. Help me welcome Stephen Cunetto.
Well, good afternoon. How is everybody? Thank you all for coming out today on such a bright and sunshiny day. When I was driving in, I thought, it's raining. Nobody's going to show up, so it's great to see this many people here. And it's great to be here in Jackson at the two Mississippi museums to talk to you about a museum that's in the northern part of the state. Very pleased to be able to come down and share with you some of the sounds and images from the Charles H. Templeton Senior Music Museum. Have any of you heard of the Templeton Museum? Okay, a few of you. And also, I'm going to talk about the Charles H. Templeton Ragtime and Jazz Festival. Have any of you heard about that? Okay, well, good. I'm glad to hear that some of you have heard about it, but I'm glad to be able to introduce you to these two this museum and this festival that we're hosting and have been hosting for a number of years. Also in Starkville at the MSU campus, of course, we have the Ulysses S. Grant Presidential Library, which hopefully you all are familiar with. If you haven't been to that museum, it's also housed in Mitchell Memorial Library. We'd love for you to come up and visit it, as well as the John Grisham Room. As many of you know, John Grisham was a graduate of Mississippi State before he went to the University of Mississippi to get his law degree. So we have his collection at Mississippi State as well, and have a room dedicated to John Grisham. So we love for you to come up and see all of these museums all in one spot in Starkville. So we're going to try and get the technology to work. So when I was talking to Chris and Eric, they said that this is maybe one of the more complicated setups that we've done before. So that'll be challenging as we go through this, but I'm sure that Eric will rise to the occasion and we'll be able to get through this. So obviously this is a music museum, and because it's a music museum, we want to be able to not only show you these instruments, the sheet music and the other items that are in the collection, but we want you to be able to hear them. So unlike some museums where you're not allowed to touch anything, you're not allowed to hear anything, the Music Museum in the MSU libraries is one that we want to be more interactive. So I wanted this presentation to also be interactive. So I've built into it several recordings. We're going to actually allow you to hear some of the instruments play, as well as let you hear some of the film clips or video clips from past festivals. I hope that will make it more engaging and interesting to you. But before we get into that, so I wanted to tell you a little bit about Charles Templeton. Charles Templeton was a local businessman local to Starkville, of course. He grew up in Starkville. He was a Starkville High School, a product of the Starkville High School system. Went to played band at Starkville High School and at Mississippi State. Of course, he was not called Mississippi State in 1949 when he graduated, but he was a graduate of Mississippi State, and he actually played in the band. He played the piccolo and also the oboe. But he was not a pianist. Many people think that since the collection has so many pieces of sheet music in it that he also played piano, but he does not play the piano. He was also, as I said, he was a businessman. He owned numerous businesses in the Starkville area. He owned the Templeton car dealership, which is in operation for many, many years, which eventually passed down to his son in 2004, 2005. And his son eventually closed that dealership. And then he also had part ownership in the Holiday Inn, as well as a recording label. And that's the fact that many people didn't know that he actually had a recording label called Tempwood V Records. And he produced several artists out of Nashville and had that recording label for several years. He obviously was also an avid collector. He was married to Mary Ann Templeton. They met many years ago. She was a graduate at MUW. They met there. And then they had two children, Charles Templeton Jr., as we call him, Chip, and the daughter, Mary Beth Langston. The Templetons are both still very much involved in the Templeton Museum and the Templeton Festival. Mr. Templeton passed away in about 2000. His wife passed away about 4 or 5 years ago, and she, until her death, was very involved in the museum and actually provided the funding that allowed us to renovate a space in Mitchell Memorial Library to house this collection. Chip has been very involved in this collection, in the museum and the development of the museum and the Templeton Festival as well. So the collection, Chip likes to call it the three-legged stool because it has 3 different parts to it. As you can see from this slide, the collection includes recordings and cylinders, and there's about 13,000 of those. Sheet music, about 22,000 pieces of sheet music, and then about 200 musical instruments. And you can imagine one of the most frequently asked questions is, where did he house all of this stuff? Because he collected this over a 40 or 50 year period, started collecting in the 40s when his wife first found a Victrola in an antique store. He bought it, he fell in love with it, they fell in love with it, and then that kind of started him on a journey of collecting. And talking to Chip has told us that when he started something, he followed through with gusto. He never stopped. So he collected quite a collection related to this. He collected quite a bit of items for this collection. And he had these housed in a number of different places. As I mentioned, he had a number of businesses. He had them in the Holiday Inn that he was part owner of. He had them in his, of course, in his house. He had them in the Oldsmobile dealership. He even had it in some storage facilities, so he had it spread out in a number of different locations. I've got the term here, the business of music, and I put that there because Mr. Templeton really, as I said before, he was not a piano player. He loved music, but he was not a performer. But he came to this from a different perspective. Rather than the music part of it, he really came at it looking at it from a business perspective. So he called this, and he termed this collection, the business of music, because he was really interested in learning more about what made this particular instrument do well in the market as opposed to this one. Because in these early years of the development of the gramophones, they were developing them almost every year. And as time went on, they would evolve from one small instrument to a large piece of furniture, and that evolved into smaller devices that we have today. So he was really interested in the business side of music. What I've shown you here is on the right side to your right, some images from the museum. The top is in the very back of the museum. As I mentioned before, we have 3 different parts of the collection, and obviously we can't display 13,000 pieces of sheet music. So we have a marquee in the very back that displays about 64 pieces from the collection, and we rotate those items in this display. Chip Templeton actually helps us go through and select pieces from the sheet music collection to display. As I said, he's a performer, so he really has an affinity for the music. And also, we usually tie the display here to a different theme. So obviously, we're coming up on the Ragtime Festival, so we have a lot of the rags that are on display. The second picture is the second room in the museum, and it shows the cabinets that were built thanks to Mrs. Templeton, and a number of the pieces on display. You can see right there we have a harp that's on display as well. So I wanted to dissect the different parts of the collection real quickly. So the recordings, as I mentioned, we have about 12 to 13,000 recordings. The recordings include things like, of course, LPs. We have the diamond discs, the music box discs. You've seen the music boxes that have the large metal discs. We have a number of those. We have music rolls and also the Edison cylinders. And this is a picture of the cylinders. So these are about 4 inches long, typically made of a plastic-type substance, and the recording, of course, is encoded on that cylinder. Edison invented this particular device, the cylinder, and he preferred the cylinder over the flat disc, but of course, an aspect of the business of music, right? It didn't pan out very well in the market, and they ended up, of course, with the flat discs. And as you can imagine, one of the factors there was this would be much more difficult to store in your house than a flat disk. Obviously, a flat disk won't take up as much room as a cylinder does. So the sheet music collection, we've been working with the sheet music collection since we brought it to the library, which was about 2001, 2002. And the sheet music collection does have about 22,000 pieces. There are some duplicates in that collection, so we do have gone through a process of trying to digitize the items in the collection, but we have not digitized all the duplicates. So we've got about 13,000 pieces that have actually been digitized to date and are available on our website. But the collection was divided into different categories or different genres, and you can see those listed here: ragtime, blues, show tunes, foxtrots, popular music, war songs, Irving Berlin, and there are several other genres as well. When Mr. Templeton donated the collection to Mississippi State in 1985-86, he had it appraised, the entire collection, the sheet music, the instruments, and the recordings. And at that time, the appraisal came in at about $485,000. And you can imagine what that would be worth today, probably closer to $1 million today. But he also worked with a musicologist from New York City, David A. Jason, to actually do the appraisal and also categorize the sheet music, because I felt like there was a huge value in just this sheet music alone. And as I said, we've worked with David Jason, who's the musicologist, he worked with David Jason to actually categorize the items in the collection, and also has worked with us on the digitization project as well. So these are some of the covers from the sheet music. I think one of the things that you'll obviously notice very quickly is they're very colorful, they're very vibrant, they're works of art in of themselves. And that's one of the things that we have tried to promote on campus, is that this collection is not just about music, it's about art, it's about the business side of the music industry. But even as you look through the pieces of sheet music, you'll find advertisements for different household items that you can look at and also see what did a Victrola cost at that time, because those ads would be in the sheet music as well. So these are some more additional pieces from the sheet music collection. Again, very vibrant, colorful. And we also have worked with our art department to make sure that they're aware of these, that this could be used as they're doing research for their art historiography classes. So as I mentioned before, we have digitized the collection, and that was one of the cornerstones of our original intent, was to make sure that that collection was provided to the world. So we went through a process of digitizing everything in the collection, but because of copyright laws, we're not able to digitize from anything that was not able to publish on our website, anything from 1924 to the present. And that is now, copyright laws changed a year or so ago, and it used to be a fixed date where 1923 was that fixed date. That has now changed, and every year we'll be able to add the next year of content to the website. So right now we have about 12 to 13,000 pieces of sheet music on the collection, on the website, and this is actually the URL that you can go to search it. And we really get a huge number of hits on this site. We get a lot of people from all over the country, all over the world that are looking for sheet music, and they use this site extensively. We also have worked through the Templeton Music Festival, talking to our performers that come in, and they use this site as well as they're looking for content to perform during their programs. And this, I should say, so this is the Maple Leaf Rag, which was published by or written by Scott Joplin, who many of you, of course, have heard of. All right, so the instruments, there are about, as I said, about 200 musical instruments in the collection. 192 of them are on display in the museum, and we do want this to be an interactive process, so we do play the items in the museum. We have a staff member, Linda Graham, who goes through and does the tours for us. We also have some students, and they actually open up the cases and will play many of the instruments in the collection. So we have a number of Thomas Edison phonographs. We have the Eldridge Johnson gramophones. We think we have every one of the Victor Talking Machine Company gramophones that were produced. So we think it's a very extensive collection. The Columbia gramophones, a Link player piano, which I'll show you another video of in a few minutes, as well as an Aeolian orchestral player organ. I don't think that's in this picture. Several player organs. We have cylinder and disc music boxes. The music boxes, I think, are just exquisite, and the sound that come off them is just amazing. Organettes and of paper and cob varieties as well. In this picture, you can see another couple of pictures from the museum. The bottom picture here shows, in the middle there, I think is a really interesting piece. It is, I guess you'd say it's an early jukebox. So it's actually a cylinder machine. It has 5 or 6 different cylinders in that box. You put your nickel in, you wind it up, and it'll play through those 5 or 6 different cylinders, which is pretty cool. So I guess you'd say it's the predecessor to the jukebox. The one on the left is a record player, and then the one on the right is a music box. Has a beautiful sound to it. These are some additional pieces from the museum. This one on the left is an Edison home phonograph from 1901. Of course, you can see this has a beautiful horn on it. Some of them are metal, like this one. Others are wooden. But the horns on them, I think, are just exquisite. And then you can see here also it has a top for it, so you can close it up, take the horn off, put the top on it, and move it from one room to the other, or take it out on a date with you. This next one is Edison radio phonograph, so it allows you to play both the radio and a phonograph, and it was built in the 1920s. And this Link player piano is a really interesting piece. It was from like 1910, I believe it was. And you can see it has a piano roll in the bottom part of it. That's one roll, and it is fixed in there such that we will probably never take it out of there or try to switch that roll. But it's one roll. It plays 15 or 16 different songs, and it continuously moves through the device. And of course, it is a roll, so it has the cutouts in it that tells the piano where to play, and at the top of it, and behind that stained glass, are the actual keys on the piano. And there's a video clip that you'll see it in action in just a few minutes. And then the far right, I couldn't do this presentation without showing Nipper. Nipper is the dog on the far right, and he is, many of you know, has been the mascot for Victor Talking Company for many years. Of course, Victor Talking Company became RCA, and you still see this image that you see at the bottom here, which is the logo for RCA, Victor Talking Company, where you have Nipper listening to a phonograph. That was an actual painting that was done back in the early 1900s, late 1800s, with the painter's dog was actually sitting there listening to his master's voice on the phonograph, and he painted that. He then tried to sell that painting as a logo to Thomas Edison. He didn't like it, so he said no. He then took it to Emil Berliner, who was kind of a competitor for Edison. And he said, let's do it, but he was actually selling, instead of the cylinder pieces, it was a gramophone. So they had to redo the picture I guess they had to Photoshop it in usually today's terms, to match the items that he was actually selling. So that became, of course, the mascot that you still see on labels today. And that the nipper is actually about 3 feet tall, 4 feet tall. And we have some smaller ones as well, and those are referred to as chipper. So we have chipper and nipper. All right, so this is where we're going to play one of the items, but this is the Aeolian Orchestrelle. It's a player reed organ. And I think you can see here in the bottom, you can see the pumps. So originally, it would have been you'd have to use your feet to pump the organ to mechanize it. But of course, in later years, they added an electric motor, which we of course still use today. It has the stops in the middle of it, so you actually could change the sound and the tone on it. And you can also play it as a regular organ, or you could use it as a player organ. So Eric, why don't we cue this one up and let them hear a little bit about this one. And here's where the technical aspect of this comes into play. Here we go. So that's the Aeolian, and that's, like I said, a player organ. This next one is a, can you switch back to that, Eric? Oh yeah, so this is the Victorian bird cage. This was built in the late, mid-1800s, and it's actually a bird cage. And I wanted you to see it because it's got some intricate, great sound to it, of course, but also it has some little birds who are chirping. I don't know that I could listen to this for a long time, but I think it's a really interesting piece. Oh my gosh, I should advance to the next slide. So this is the Victorian bird cage. You can see the two birds in the actual bird cage. You can see on the right-hand side, there's a little wind up, so you actually wind it up, and then it plays. So Eric, why don't we switch over to the video for that one? This was made in France in about 1870 or 1877. So you can see the tail moving as well as the beak moving. I just think that's incredible that was built in 1870s in France, and then of course it still works today. And that's the other amazing thing about this collection. See what I mean? You couldn't listen to that for a long time, could you? But it has a great sound to it. But as we have students coming through these museums, they are just astounded at the fact that these are, instruments that are not hooked up to a battery or don't have a charger to them, and that they just actually play. So this next one is a Victor Victrola, and it was built in the mid-1900s. Yep. 1920s. And you probably have seen many of the Victor Victrolas. You may have had some at your house or seen them in antique stores. But these are very popular. And I wanted to play this one for you. One of the things I wanted to point out is, of course, we had to worry about sound of the volume. So in order to control the volume, you open the doors on the front. It lets out more volume. You close the door, you don't have quite as much volume. This was built in about 1922. And these were, like I said, very, very popular. Eric, let's play this one. And some of you may recognize the tune that's being played on this one. Natalie, you better. I think you get the point. So Hail State. So Mr. Templeton, as I mentioned before, was an MSU grad. He did play in the band, so we thought it would be appropriate to play a version of an album that the band recorded in the mid-'40s. And this next one is the Regina phone, built in the early 1900s. And it's kind of unique in that you can see at the top, it's got the disc, the metal disc on it. So it plays the metal disc like a music box, but you can also take off the lever, take off the plate, and then actually switch it to a phonograph, so you can actually play a record. And also to control the sound, you can't really tell it in this picture, but there's some doors on the front of that, right below the disc, where you open that to control the volume as well. Eric, let's play this one. So, pretty good quality sound, isn't it? Built in the early 1900s, and of course still plays today. And again, I think those just have an incredible sound on them. Lastly, I wanted to play an Edison. So this is actually an Edison opera, built in around 1911. And you can see this case also is one that has a cover on it. Take the horn off, and then you can take it out. And it also plays the cylinder. So I want you to be able to hear one that actually has a cylinder playing. And this is about a 4-minute cylinder. It would play a 4-minute cylinder. I'm not going to play the whole 4 minutes, though. Eric.
On a rainy, rainy day, and if your sweetie sighs, just tell her that a smile will always stay. Whenever skies are gray, don't worry or fret. A smile will bring you sunshine and you'll never get wet. So let a smile be your umbrella on a rainy, rainy day.
All right, Eric. Eric, you can stop that one. So I didn't know I was going to time it just perfectly like that, where we're playing a song about rainy days, and it's a rainy day, but hey, things work out, right? All right, so next, that's kind of a good overview of the museum, but I want to see a little video clip that we did a couple years ago. This was actually produced by Farm Week, and they do a program called Off the Highway that aired in September, and it gives a good overview and lets you see some more items from the museum. So I wanted you to see this clip. Eric, let's play that one.
You tell me about the Templeton Museum.
Well, it opened in 2006. It's divided into 3 parts. The first part is the players, and there's over 200 players in the collection. The second part is the playable art, which is records, metal discs, cylinders, and paper rolls. There's over 13,000 pieces. The largest part of the collection, though, is the sheet music, and we have over 22,000 pieces of sheet music. It's one family's collection. Mr. Templeton was a businessman here from Starkville. He calls the collection the business of music.
Do any of these players work?
Yes, we play many of them. Each one has got a blurb that describes them, and as we tour our guests, I play several of them.
So when people think of vintage music players, normally they think of record players. But you guys have something older than that. You have players that play off these wax cylinders, right?
We do, correct. And I do play a wax cylinder for our guests that come.
So I also know you happen to know you have a player piano in there that works.
We do have a player piano.
Okay, what's the story behind that?
It's from 1910. It's a Link automatic piano. It's a jukebox. It takes nickels. We open it and show the mechanics of it while we play it.
So what is your personal favorite piece in this museum? Now I know you probably love everything and there's a lot of really cool stuff here, but which one is your personal favorite?
My favorite, I'm sorry to say it doesn't play, but there's a player in the middle room. It's a Peter Pan portable gramophone from 1927. It's covered with alligator skin, but it was a small enough instrument that a gentleman would take a picnic basket and a quilt and that small player and go to the meadow and court his young lady, and it's just a unique small piece that I like. Mr. Templeton was in the band when he was here. He played the oboe and the
Stop it
piccolo.
there, Eric. So that gives you a good little overview of the museum. And I did want to, before I get into the Templeton Festival, wanted to give you that history of the museum because that, of course, leads into the Templeton Music Festival. So in 2000, so the collection came to Mississippi State in the 1985-86. It was housed in another building across campus. It was an older building. It was appropriate for the collection, but it was an older building. It didn't have the proper climate control for that collection. So that eventually was closed, and then it was moved to the library and opened up in 2006. In 2006, 2007, we started talking about how do we take the museum to the next step, and that was, we came up with the idea in concert with talking to Chip Templeton to come up with a Charles Templeton Ragtime and Jazz Festival as another way of not only promoting the collection that we have, but also to talk about ragtime, which was a love of Mr. Templeton's. And it would bring people into the museum as well. So we started this festival in 2007. So this year marks our 14th festival, and we're very proud of that and excited to have this one coming up at the end of February. And I'll show you a promo for that in just a second. But the festival is comprised of some talks at the piano during the day and also some concerts in the evening. And these are held in the library as well as in the auditorium on campus. Before I get a little bit further into the weeds about the Templeton Festival, I wanted to talk a little bit about ragtime. Of course, ragtime was the cornerstone of the collection. Mr. Templeton loved ragtime, and I think he really gravitated to it because ragtime was really the first American music, truly American music. And it has, many people describe when they're talking about ragtime, talk about it as the trunk of the tree, if you think about music being a tree. Ragtime being the trunk of the tree, and then other forms of music grew out of that. So you have ragtime as the trunk, and then jazz comes out of that as a limb, as a branch of ragtime, jazz, and then blues, and then even into rock and roll. So all of the forms of American music kind of have their roots in ragtime. So I have a clip, thought it would be appropriate to let you hear from Mr. Templeton himself. This is a clip that was done shortly after the collection was donated to Mississippi State. He, during that time, right after it was donated, we had two similar festivals to what we're doing today, not necessarily connected to the one we're doing today. Not today being today, but today being in this current 13 to 14 years. But this, he did this in conjunction with this, so you'll see a little bit of clip of the performance right before it. So Eric, let's play this one.
In our current day of conversation, where jobs are important. It created the building of pianos, the publishing music, the fun things that you do, and besides that, the last result of all of it is to get the beginning of all of that, you have to get back to 1895 and the beginning of ragtime. Then you see you have the first American music coming right out of the generations of the South, the blend that comes from here, and it moves on. When it got to be played too fast, Scott Joplin said, played slow, play slow. Eventually you get over the blues, it all changes to the blues, and still the same idea. And as you move up then through Dixieland, as you go up through the whole routine, you got to have the father of it all, which is ragtime. And that's where the fun begins, and that's where happy music begins. That's where you could play music and it was the life of the party. And you could be the life of the party if you could play music. Sort of ruled out a little bit, little girl in her pigtails playing minuet and jig. It changed the whole thing. And it's changed it and changed it and changed it, and we've changed it as it's moved through the whole program. As we took the best of the black and the white world, put it together, integrated it, and didn't even know it. That's great to me, and it's fun to be here, and this is the story we have to tell.
There you go, Eric. You can stop it there. I think he says it very well, how the American styles blend together. I thought that was an appropriate clip. So we started out the festival as purely ragtime. Over the years, we have evolved that. So now, today, the festival includes not only ragtime performers, but also jazz, blues, even some rock and roll as well, early rock and roll. So the festival, and I'm going to speed up a little bit because I know I'm getting close on time, but for the festival schedule, the way the festival is laid out, just to give you an overview of it. So on Thursday night, we have what's called the Gatsby Gala, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a second. During the day on Friday and Saturday, during the daytime from 9 to 3, on both those days, we have seminars in the Templeton Museum, we have tours of the museum, and even silent films. And that's great. The students love the silent films because, of course, they've never had the opportunity to experience that. And these talks at the piano, these seminars, are really informal ways for the performers to be able to interact with the audience. So they're very, as I said, informal. They're talking about their life in the music industry. They're talking about their favorite pieces. So they're very informal but informative. Also, we have in the evenings a major concert in McComas Hall on campus, and that's where we have all 4 performers. Typically, we have 4 performers there, and they play a concert both evenings, and they start usually at 7:30. But they're 2 different shows. You know, a lot of people think that since we're doing the same, it seems like it's going to be the same show, but it's 2 totally different shows each night. So the Gatsby Gala was added in 2014. You may remember in 2013, they re-released or did a new version of The Great Gatsby with Leonardo DiCaprio. So we thought we'd build on that because that was, of course, set in the 1920s, 1930s, ragtime jazz era. And we started this program, and it's a conjunction. It was another way to bring in other aspects of the campus community. So it's a partnership with our School of Human Sciences. So we asked one of the classes in the MSU Fashion Design and Merchandising program to actually design outfits based on the 1920s and 1930s era. So they go through the process of researching all of the outfits and actually developing apparel. And then we have our MSU Fashion Board that actually models those items in the library. We have a big staircase where they descend, and of course we ask these models to put on their high heels and walk down this great big staircase, which is challenging, but they rise to the occasion. But the outfits that they've designed over the years are just exquisite. So let me show you a video clip from the 2018 festival. Well, that's a really fun event that we continue to do today. We started that, like I said, in 2014. Students get into it, and we also ask everybody who attends to please join us by wearing their favorite 1920s, 1930s apparel. We have a lot of people that do it, and it's a lot of fun. These are some of the images from past Gatsby Galas, and you can see on the far right there some of our attendees that have dressed up in their flapper outfits. Bring your boa out and have a good time. Also, as a part of the educational outreach, we like to take our performers into the community. It's a great way to introduce the students to these performers and the outstanding artistry that they have. We take them to the local schools. We take them to French camp. We also have I think it's 5 years ago, we asked, we've kind of learned of Keon Dosher, who was an MSU student, had a lot of health issues, but he had a love of playing the piano. He became aware of him and his artistry and asked him to perform at the festival. He did a great job. He was just an amazing performer. Everybody fell in love with him. Sadly, he passed away about 2 weeks later, unexpectedly. He had a bout with cancer throughout most of his life, and his story just touched all of us as well as the performers. And we thought we'd name a award for him. So we've named this Keon Dosher Student Achievement Award. And every year, thanks to Keon, we now have a student performance at the festival on Friday evening. We ask the MSU Department of Music to select the performer. They get an award, and then they get to perform at the festival. But that's been a great outcome from the festival as well. These are some images from the seminars. Like I said, they're very informal and meant to be engaging. You can see they're sitting right next to the performers. You can ask them questions. And one of the things we've been doing the last couple of years is asking each of the performers just to kind of talk about their life in the industry, what got them into this industry. And what's always interesting listening to them is where they started, because most of these performers are classically trained. And they then happened upon ragtime or jazz and then fell in love with it and got engrossed in it and kind of changed their life. And they moved into performing more ragtime and jazz. But most of the performers that we bring in are classically trained. We also do the silent movies. I mentioned that before. This is a couple of clips from Frederick Hodges playing, I think it's a Buster Keaton film. And then, of course, in the evenings, we have the performances. And we have a wide variety of performers that we bring in. We do bring in typically about 4 performers each year. We try to spread out the different genres that they perform. So we have one usually that does some rag, some that does a little bit of jazz. Sometimes we do even some rock and roll, as I said. So I wanted to play a couple of clips for you to really give you a feel for the performers. This is Martin Spitznagel, and before we play that clip, though, so ragtime, as we mentioned, its heyday was in the late 1800s, up to about 1910. But then it had a resurgence in 1973 because of a film that became very popular during that time. And The Entertainer may have been that song. So does anybody know what that film would be? The Sting. The Sting, that's right. Starring Robert Redford and Paul Newman. Very good. So this is actually Martin Spitznagel performing The Entertainer by Scott Joplin from 1902. Ooh.
The first and second sections of The Entertainer by Scott Joplin, a.k.a. The Sting, a.k.a. the Ice Cream Truck Song. I consider myself a vintage piano enthusiast. I discovered ragtime when I was a kid and was smitten by it, and I really have, from that point, grown into a lot of different genres that ragtime itself grew into, so jazz and blues and stride and some more modern styles as well.
We'll stop that one. And I know I'm trying to move on because I know Chris is back there going, wait, you got to hurry up. So I'm going to play another clip from that includes Tom Hook and Jeff Barnhart. Jeff is our artistic director, and he is from Connecticut, and Tom Hook is from New Orleans. And this is Dill Pickles Rag.
Dill Pickles Rag, is that it?
Ooh, that's the one.
All right,
that's
good.
the one. Take it away.
They're very engaging.
Oh, really?
It's not just like a classical performance where you sit down and you're very quiet. They're very energetic. Always have 2 pianos on stage, so the two pianists can sit down and play at the same time. All right, Eric. Pretty good, huh? So that's Dill Pickles Rag. Next, we have, I want to make sure you hear this duo because they will be performing again this year at the festival. This is Stephanie Trick from Missouri and her husband Paolo Alderighi from Italy. And they play stride piano. And it's very unique because they play 4 hands on 1 keyboard, which is very interesting to watch. So let's play this one. They're a dynamic duo. They just do amazing things on those keyboards. So it's great that we're able to bring them back this year. I'm going to skip this one and go to this last one. So last year we had Dave Bennett, who is a young performer, and he does imitation of not only Benny Goodman but also Jerry Lee Lewis. And you can see the 2 different images here. He does a great job with both of these, so I wanted to make sure you saw these. Eric? Fast forward a little bit over to the Jerry Lee Lewis part. He does have a break between them. And you can see he messes up his hair a little bit, takes off the glasses.
Come on over, baby, whole lot of shaking going on. As I said, come on over, baby, baby, you can't go wrong. We ain't faking. Whole lot of shaking going on. Come on over, baby. We got
He's a very dynamic
in the barn. Woo, honey. Come on, baby. I got the bull by the horn.
Here's some singing going on.
We ain't faking.
All right, Eric. So he is a lot of fun. He really brought the house down this last year. I got a little nervous, I have to say, and brother will understand this. When he stood up on the piano seat and was doing his Jerry Lee Lewis thing, banging on the keyboard, I knew the Dean Coleman was going to probably shoot me, but we survived. I don't think he did it backwards. So this year, we're very excited to have we're very pleased to be able to have the festival in February instead of March. It's February 27th, 28th, and 29th, and we have a great slate of performers this year. We're very pleased to have this year Jaron Blind Boy Paxton performing. He's kind of our headliner. He is an amazing performer. He is a multi-instrumentalist. He's from Los Angeles, but has roots in Louisiana. His grandmother was from Louisiana. He is blind, legally blind, but he plays the fiddle, he plays the banjo, he plays the guitar, he plays the harmonica, bones, and several other instruments. And he's playing all of those during this festival, so it should be a very entertaining piece. During the program, he's actually going to do, during the seminars, he's going to do a talk on black folk music as well. Stephanie Trick and Paolo Alderighi. Jeff Barnhart will also be playing, and Bill Edwards, who is a renowned musicologist as well. He's become an avid ragtime performer as well. I've got a quick video clip. How are we doing on time? Eric, let's play the 30-second clip for the festival.
era and the fashion trends of the 1920s will come to life when you join us February 27th through the 29th for the 14th Annual Charles H. Templeton Ragtime and Jazz Festival, presented by the Mississippi State University Libraries. The event kicks off with the Gatsby Gala fashion show, followed by 2 days and nights full of the timeless music that shaped an era and defined a generation. Join us for concerts by renowned performers, seminars, panel discussions, and more.
So I hope that you will take some time at the end of February, come up and visit us. You'll be able to see not only the festival, of course, be able to experience the museum, and is my slide? There it is. Let me go back to the end. Also, of course, I mentioned that we have the Grant Library and the Grisham Room that you'll be able to see as well. We do have the URLs here that take you to information about the museum as well as the festival. We have the festival schedule published online if you'd like to look at that. We do sell CDs from the festival as well. And every year we also record, the MSU TV Center records the performances, and they put together a 30-minute, two 30-minute programs that air on Mississippi Public Broadcasting. And the one from 2018 will air March 29th at 3 o'clock if you'd like to look at that. So with that, I think I've run a little long on time, but I thank you so much for your attentive to the program, and I certainly will take in any questions. If you have any questions, raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this presentation. I wanted to make my own personal testimonial to our Jackson audience here about and encourage them to attend this wonderful festival. I've attended 3 in a row. I think it was 2016, 17, and 18. I missed last year because of a conflict, but I do intend to come up for this earlier version on the 29th. Being a school teacher, it was hard to get away for Thursday and Friday, but I just plan to make an all-day Saturday thing out of it, and I would encourage all those in Jackson here who have the opportunity to make the drive up to Starkville for the presentation. Now, coming from me, people in this audience who know me know that I'm Mr. Baroque Music, Mr. Co-founder of the Mississippi Academy of Ancient Music, and so on. But what some of them may not know about myself is that as a teenager in the Chicago area, I fixed player pianos. I had a player piano. I fell in love with ragtime and the whole institution of early music from Tin Pan Alley and so on. And so it's a part of my personal history that I love to cultivate and reinvigorate by attendance at this festival. And again, it's a wonderful opportunity. So I encourage all of you here in Jackson to support them, if not for the full 3 days, at least for one of them. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Appreciate it.
Very interesting. Is the collection closed, or is it able to receive new editions as they might become available?
The second most popularly asked question, popular question that's asked of us. So the collection is closed. We don't add anything to the Templeton collection itself. We do have, of course, through special collections, we accept other collections. So if you have any sheet music that you're interested in donating or musical instruments, we certainly love to talk to you about that. But we don't typically add to his collection because it is truly just his collection. Great question, though.
I have a question about the durability of the loops in the music player, and I know you had some wax cylinders you play. How long do those last, and do you replace them or archive them in some way to preserve them?
Great question. So for the instruments themselves, we actually have been struggling for a couple of years since we've had the collection since 2006 to find someone that could help us with repairing the instruments. We just recently found someone earlier last year that specializes in refurbishing these collections, much like the gentleman over here. And he has been working with us to do just that. And he has really told us and educated us that we need to play them even more than we currently play, that playing them more will help sustain their life. So we do, but then to answer your other part of your question, we do try to rotate out which pieces we are playing. And also, like if we're playing one cylinder, we'll swap it out for a different cylinder, so we're not playing that same cylinder all the time. Now, the Link player piano that I showed the picture of that has that one big continuous roll, we have never changed it. I'm not sure that I will ever change it while I'm on on duty, because it just looks like a daunting task to try to take that out. Thank you.
Thanks. Very impressive. Quite impressive. What I want to say is I'm not a music major, so forgive me for this question. But what is it about ragtime that distinguishes it from? You say it's American. What is it about ragtime that makes it American?
So I actually had planned to bring a definition of ragtime, because I was afraid that question would come up. But and maybe there's a music major in the room that could better explain it than I can. But it was really a blending of the African sounds that were coming out of the South with other forms of music, and combining those two things together really is what distinguished it as a separate sound. So it has a very distinct, I guess it's the left hand that taking the marches, adding the African tones, blended together to kind of create this new sound. And you really hear that dominant left hand in the playing. Does anybody else have a better explanation of it?
The Templeton collection is quite impressive, but we should not forget the history that was U.B. Blake and Alberta Hunter and W.C. Handy, and I'm hoping that they are being recognized in the music school to supplement this museum.
I agree. And we do have a lot of W.C. Handy, U.B. Blake in the collection as well, and those and Scott Joplin, of course, are all played quite a bit during the festival.
We have come to the top of another hour. If you have not picked them up, Stephen has brought literature about both the museum and the festival. It's right over here by the coffee. So I have been to the museum. It's fabulous. I have wanted to go to the Jazz Festival for years and intend to do it this year. Thank you all for being here. I hope that we see you at some of the programs that we have coming up and back here next week. Help me thank Stephen Cunetto for this fabulous program today.
Thank you. Thank y'all. You've been a great audience. Appreciate it.